Good evening. I will now call the September 28th, 2022 regular Historic Preservation Committee meeting to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and 4 members are in attendance, establishing a quorum with Chair Graham absent. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is the initial public comment period. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. The public may call 702-589-9629 to provide public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come before and make comments at this time? Seeing as no one has called in and there's no public comments from the audience, we will move on. So agenda item number 1 is for possible election of officers for possible action.
Oh, sorry, if I could just do a brief overview.
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. So every September is the time to select a new chair and vice chair of the Planning Commission. The process works this way. We start with the chair, and you will open it up for nominations. And after the people nominate individuals for chair, you need to confirm that that person is willing to accept that potential position. And then you would close the nominations and vote. If only one person is selected, then they automatically become that position. After you've determined who will be chair, then you move on to vice chair and do the same process. If multiple people are nominated, then what you would do is you would hold a vote for the first nominee and then hold a vote for the second nominee. Any questions? All right, so the chair can ask for nominations for chair for the coming year.
I open up the chair, or it's open for nominations for chair of the Historic Preservation Committee.
I would like to make a nomination. I thought I would give a little speech as to why I wanted to nominate this person, but I decided not to do that. So I would just like to nominate Blair Davenport as the chairperson of the Historic Preservation Committee.
So is there a discussion, or
Well,
do I ask for a second?
Well, no, you don't need a
Oh, I have to
second,
say a
but
second.
first
Do
you
I?
need to say whether you're willing to serve as chair.
Or do I say are there other nominations?
Well, certainly, but we need to confirm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I accept the nomination.
okay.
Are there any other nominations?
Move to close nomination.
Well, with no other nominations, it's automatic. All right, so there are no other nominations, so.
There are no
Mem-
other nominations.
So Member Davenport will serve as chair for the coming year.
Okay, thank you. So now open nominations up for vice chair. I nominate Ray Turner.
Well, I would accept that, thank you.
Any other nominations?
All right. You have your chair and vice chair for the coming year.
Thanks, everyone.
Congratulations.
All right. All right, agenda item number 2 for possible action, approval of the minutes of the August 24th, 2022 regular meeting.
Motion to accept the minutes as printed.
All those in favor?
Well, second.
Or second? All those in favor?
Aye.
So motion is approved unanimously.
Motion is approved unanimously. All right, agenda item number 3 for possible action, committee consultation on Section 106 review for the proposed Boulder City Municipal Airport Tower.
All right, the construction of the airport control tower is being funded through the use of federal dollars, and therefore requires Section 106 review to evaluate the tower's impact on historic resources. Newfields was hired to conduct the review, and their report is included in your packet. You'll see on the screen, it shows the proposed control tower for the Boulder City Airport. Newfields defined the area of potential effect as the airport boundary, which is over 300 acres, and determined that the project would not have an impact on identified historical resources contained within the study. Marissa Adu, our airport manager, is here to answer any questions, and I'm going to get John Gorshek on the phone, who is with Northfields, and so he can answer any questions you have regarding his report.
Does anybody have any comments or opinions at this time?
Are we going to wait for Michael, or are we going to just
Should
jump
we
in
do that?
there?
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, John?
Hi.
Hi, this is Michael Mays with Boulder City, and we have the Historic Preservation Committee discussing your study. And so I've
Yes.
let them know that you are available to answer any questions regarding the study.
Yep, I'm here and I'm watching the live stream. So happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any comments, opinions about this project, or this agenda item?
I have some comments and questions and an opinion, if I may. I don't have any problem with the conclusion of this report, but I do have some problems with this report. I managed to read the whole thing. But I found some things that to me are disturbing, okay? For instance, on page 21 of the report, and I think it's 42 of our packet, it's 21 of the report, there's a reference to Wilbur and Meade, 1933. But if you go back to the bibliography, it isn't listed in the bibliography, and I don't like that kind of thing. I mean, this is a professional report, and those are the kind of things that make me wonder, well, if they can't get that right, how do they get the whole thing right?
I see.
So that's one little thing, okay? And another thing is up the top of page 22, page 43 on the packet, President Roosevelt. Well, you could have put Theodore Roosevelt in there because Franklin Roosevelt wasn't alive in well, he was alive, but he wasn't president in 1902. So those little kind of things, I mean, that somebody reads that and thinks President Roosevelt he wasn't here. On that same page down at the bottom, there's a reference to Dunbar and McBride, 1993. Well, a man's name wasn't Dunbar. The man's name was Dunar, D-U-N-A-R. Dunbar was an entirely different person. On page 23, there's paragraphs there that state things that there's no reference to. And I just don't believe in a professional report like this. You should do that. I mean, unless this is work that you have done personally, you ought to give reference to the people that have done the work. And that happens over and over again. Those little things like that just irritate me. On page 26, 47 of the packet, they say exploitation of certain mammals, and then they list the desert tortoise. Well, the desert tortoise isn't a mammal; it's a reptile. So if they can't tell the difference between a reptile and a mammal, I don't know how they can tell the difference between a pop bottle and a beer bottle. But anyway, those are the little things that irritate me about this. Now the conclusion. Actually, there was there's David Valentine. There's we'll skip that. The conclusion is fine. I don't know why we have 69 pages of stuff and then the little 2-paragraph conclusion. But the bottom line is I concur with the conclusion. I mean that there is no reason that we can't build an airport tower out there. But I really would like to see these kind of things cleaned up in these reports. I mean, these are professional reports. And they're done by professional people. And if I wrote a thesis about this, my thesis advisor would kick me out of the office.
Mine would as well.
And so, I don't know who wrote it, and I don't really mean to degrade anybody because it's an interesting report, by the way. I mean, I enjoyed reading the thing. There's a lot of interesting history in there, but let's clean it up a little bit, okay? And then one last thing, Michael, and this is actually a question for you because and this has happened to me a couple of times, but there's on the introductory page, the attachments are number 2, proposed traffic control tower exhibit. Well, I assume that's this thing that's on page, there's no way, I guess there is, 121. I wish that you could put attachment 2 or something on there. I looked through this whole report looking for this attachment, and it finally dawned on me. It's this thing that says in little teeny tiny print down in the corner, Exhibit 1C, proposed ATCT project. I guess that's attachment 2. So that's all I have to say. But anyway, I concur with the conclusion of the report.
Well, thank you very much for pointing out those things, and you're absolutely right that those are small things that, while they don't affect the conclusion, are absolutely a reflection of the professionalism of the people writing this, and they aren't up to my standards as well. This was written before my time at Newfields, but I can promise you that any future reports that we would do for for the airport or for the engineers or for anybody, clients, federal agencies, whoever, we'll have that kind of stuff cleaned up, because it isn't up to my standards either. My thesis advisor would kick me out of the room as well for that. So thank you for pointing those things out.
Thank you.
Hi. I had two questions. One is, will there be consultation with associated tribes or other agencies that are adjacent, or other land management agencies that are adjacent to the APE, if there are?
Yes, because there's a federal nexus, because it's requiring federal money, the federal agencies involved will be required to initiate tribal consultation. And depending on which federal agencies are involved, I assume the FAA is at the very least, they each have their own procedures and policies for doing that. Some do it directly, some will request that, a third-party consultant like Newfields, for example, do it. But yes, there will be. And they will do federal agency to federal agency consultation if portions of the APE were to extend onto land, say, owned by the BLM or the Bureau of Reclamation, for instance. I don't know if that's the case here, but they would do that if there are multiple jurisdictions.
Great, thank you. And then my second question is, I'm not sure if this is for you or for Michael, and that is, you did discuss visual effects and view shed, but did that include lighting and noise? And I wasn't sure if that's addressed here in this type of a document, or perhaps another environmental NEPA document.
So, yeah, it's so only in this document, which, by the way, was written, as far as I can tell, was written at the request of Kimley Horn as a way of just determining whether any future work would have an impact on cultural resources. At that time, there wasn't any work planned. They did assess visual effects, but they did not assess noise or lighting. That is something that, in consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office and whatever federal agencies are involved, they will refine the definition of the APE to also include lighting and sound if applicable.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it I believe we concur with the decision. Or do I need to ask for a vote on that?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, and especially for SHPO's benefit, for a motion regarding concurrence with Newport's findings.
I'll try to make a motion. I've never done this before. I would move that the Historic Preservation Committee concurs with the report that there will be no adverse effect for this project on identified historic resources.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion
Passes
approves.
unanimously.
Yes.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next agenda item is number 4 for possible action, discussion with Northwind Resource Consulting LLC on potential changes to the adopted exterior design guidelines for various properties in the historic district.
So as the committee well knows, the committee has been working with Courtney Mooney in providing feedback on updated design guidelines for the historic district. In your packet, you have Northwind's proposed design guidelines for all the different architectural styles within the historic district, following the direction of the committee in previous months. In addition, Northwind has prepared guidelines for non-contributing properties. And so Courtney's here to answer your questions, and we'd be looking for additional feedback in order to proceed with the design guidelines.
Did you want to say anything
Sure.
out
Yeah,
at the
no, I
beginning,
just-
or do you just want questions?
It'll be quick. Good evening. So I just wanted to basically follow up on what Michael said, is that this is, the manifestation of the feedback that we've gotten from the committee as well as staff, working really closely with them on developing these. And I just wanted to say that one clarification is that these style guidelines, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, but you may not remember, the contributing design guidelines are for the remaining contributing properties within the district, those styles only. So if you are a non-contributing property, but you were built within the period of significance, then your design guidelines get shifted over to the non-contributing property design guidelines. So I just wanted to make that clear that, there might be a couple of styles that might be missing. And there were some tough ones because, for instance, if the craftsman style is the closest we could attribute to one building in the district that really doesn't have a really obvious style. And so there were a couple of those where there's just one building that's left in this style. So you probably noticed that if you were reading carefully. So I just wanted to point those two things out. And we're also working with Michael and Susan on how to get these online eventually.
Any comments? I'm going to go down the line.
Just go.
You're next in line. But if you want to skip yourself, that's all right.
I'll just go then. I had a lot of detailed comments that I did provide to city staff, so I'm just going to summarize those. Regarding the section or the, what you call them, the features. When you discuss fenestration, some of the styles are missing the location of entrances and doors, as well as the orientation of those doors. There's some doors that are either facing, horizontal to the street or perpendicular to the street, depending on the style. And I noticed that was missing from some of the styles that you listed. I was curious about the use of the words like primarily or typical rather than being like absolute. And the reason I was a little concerned about that is that could that be interpreted by property owners or folks reviewing certificates of appropriateness to use inappropriate treatment options because, well, it says typical, but it doesn't say I have to use that, that I have to meet that feature, that design feature. So I wasn't sure if that's appropriate or if that could be somehow, I guess, quantified or maybe more specifically applied to which are those properties that are not typical. Could those be called out from those that are typical, I guess? I don't know. I was curious about the use or adding streetscape in there somehow. That could not only be used to be a feature that defines individual properties, but I think as a whole, it could help define neighborhoods and blocks of properties that share similar characteristics and features. Also, though, streetscape tends to then deal with the historic district as a whole, perhaps. And so I listed things like entrances to properties, like curbs, driveway aprons, But also, there's the parkways, which is this quasi city property versus not, or a right-of-way of the city. But on those right-of-ways, what can people do, not only the property owners, but the city, and they're adding, or they're already street lighting, utility boxes and poles. Is it appropriate to add those things, depending on the neighborhood, on those greenways? Walls and fences, I really think there needs to be something stated emphatically about yes or no to them. Let's see. I think it would be helpful to add the style to your images, your examples. So in addition to, the address and the type of building or the name of the building, it'd be great to have the actual style that is representing. I was curious about individually listed properties or those that are recommended for individual listing. Do they need to have additional features identified? As an example, the hotel. Should it say something about paint color or exterior colors, either in general or specifically? I don't know. Window light configurations, instead of saying, actually quantify the number of panes of windows or within the window, 20/10 or 10/20. So I wasn't sure though if that is appropriate in this part, or do you do that somewhere else, maybe in the certificate of appropriateness? I don't know. I'm just kind of curious because they are so unique, or not unique, but they're, the word's not desirable, but they have an extra status attached to them, and instead of just being a part of the historic district. But then I gave some examples that I'm hoping maybe you might consider, and that is giving examples of what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. And then if you could add illustrations of what that would be. So the example I gave was when it comes to, let's say, adding a new building within the historic district, what is appropriate is to make sure that it's similar in height and width to the buildings adjacent at the site and the block, and to design and construct the foundation height to be similar to the rest of the buildings on that, in appearance to neighboring buildings. And then there's an illustration there of what that actually looks like. I'm kind of a visual person, so that to me helps me, especially when we get into really interesting words that I think most people aren't used to, like fenestration and massing and rake. Yeah, that was another one we had a conversation about. So, and then I wasn't sure if that same kind of use of determining what's appropriate versus not appropriate to the individual design guidelines, rather than in general. But and then, so for the individual styles, I had a couple of questions that are in my notes. I was curious about massing for the craftsman style, especially that example at 600 Avenue C. You stated that it's 2 stories, but is it really 1.5 stories? And I wasn't sure how you address raised basements or walk-in basements. Is that a floor or a story or not? And there are a bunch of those examples, not historically, but non-historically in the avenues where there are raised basements. Is that a story or not? I don't know. Was wondering if window frames could be identified, whether they're metal or wood. And then stucco is used a lot, but I think there's a number of buildings that are not technically stucco. They're stucco-like or stucco-ish, but they're probably gypsum board exterior siding historically. And that's it. Go for it, Charlie.
I have some comments and some questions. Courtney, let me see if I can start at the start. Probably a good place to start. Actually, I would like that raised, the raised houses, to my knowledge, I believe all of those houses that have been raised, I believe they're all non-contributing. I think they're exclusively on the avenues. And I think, if I remember right, they're all non-contributing, which would fall in a different category. But anyway, I have some questions. And let me explain a little bit about what I did, so maybe that'll help. In your report that was given to the city, you had an Appendix B, which is the Nevada State HPO Office ARA short forms. And at the beginning of those short forms, there was a table that listed all of the houses in the district that were included in your report. And by the way, Michael, this is a question for you, because if you go to the website, the Historic Preservation website, and look up the Northwind report, there's a page that says Appendix A and Appendix B, but it's only by title. They don't, the actual document, the actual table is not included in the online version, okay? The only reason I got this is because it's included in our packet that we received back in 2020, okay? The actual table. So I don't know whether that's I don't know why. It just says Appendix B and then there's nothing there. Can you look into that? Because somebody that is looking for this kind of information through the website doesn't have access to this table, and this is a valuable table. It's a beautiful table, Courtney. It's my favorite table, actually. So anyway, I took this table. You probably don't want to know, but anyway, I compared this table to all of your style, the definitions of style, okay? So, in other words, I could look here, Colonial Revival Style, Arizona Street 1305, and I can find it on this table, okay? So I went through all of them, and I came up with some questions that you can help me with. And I think I know the answer to the first one, because if I count all of the properties that are listed in your style, what do we call these things, by the way? Well, the guidelines, okay? So if I look at all of the properties that are listed in your guidelines, I come up with a total number of 212. Well, actually, it's 218. I'll tell you why, but there was 218 in your the report abstract. You list 223 contributing properties. So I'm not quite sure what it may be. There may be a federal properties listed there. I'm not quite sure what's the confusion between the two numbers. And of course, you can check my arithmetic if you want to, but I get 218 guideline properties, okay? Properties that are identified by guideline. Yet you in your report say there were 223 contributing, okay?
Okay.
And I think maybe they're federal buildings or something that aren't.
Well, they should still be in there, so we'll check.
So see what you can come up with. I see you have 11 styles. I was happy to see that because I think I counted 23 last time I counted, so that's good. But then I want to go through a few here because, and again, you can check me, but in the guidelines, or on your table Appendix B, 1320 Wyoming is listed as contributing, but it's not included in the guidelines. And I believe it's a Spanish Revival building in your ARA, is it ARA or ADA, whatever the. So that was one, 1320 Wyoming. In the table, 712 Park Place is listed as let's see, I don't know which way, it is listed as 712 Park Place is non-contributing. But I believe in your guidelines, it's listed as, or maybe I've got that backwards, but 712 is listed as non-contributing. But I have it's correct in the table. Yeah. So anyway, look at 712 Park Place, if you would, please. 505 Avenue I is not included in the guidelines, although it's included as contributing in your table, Appendix B. I believe it's a National Folk building. 311 and 315 Utah do not have guidelines, but they're listed as contributing. They're both listed as Spanish Revival. And 550 California is not included in the guidelines. And it's kind of interesting because in your ARA, is it ARA, the form? The ARA calls it minimal traditional / late modern. And you don't have a minimal traditional / late modern style. So I assume that we can just eliminate the late modern. And then I think the last one is 1220 to 1228 Arizona. And I believe that is the Dillinger and the real estate office. But that's not included in the guidelines. And in the ARA reports, it's listed as modernistic, as a style, and you don't have a modernistic style. And I think that's probably the only building that was modernistic, I'm not sure, but. So those are all the little glitches that I found. And I bring this up because hopefully down the road sometime, we're going to be asked, and sure as the dickens, the one property that they ask about is going to be one that we don't have a guideline for, okay? So please check those, and because it could be me. I mean, it would not be unusual for me to have screwed up.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. We will absolutely look into these.
And then I wanted, and actually I think Blair alludes to that in her notes. I've spent a lot of time in the avenues, as I've mentioned before. And I really believe that the avenues should be considered on their own. As I understand that they are, see, what is it? They're, where am I at? They're, which ones are they? They are, oh, the national folk. I understand that they're national folk buildings, houses. And I know that there are other buildings within the district that are also national folk buildings. But I think there's a significant difference between the national folk buildings that were built by the Bureau of Reclamation or that were built by Power and Light, and those buildings on the avenues that were built by 6 companies, because 6 companies hired their own consultant. The 6 companies looked at the plans that were provided by the Bureau for those temporary housings, and they basically said, we can't build these for the amount of money we have. So we want to design our own, and they did. They hired their own architect, they had their own builder. And if you look at those buildings as they were originally built, which is a question that comes up over and over again, because they built 136 houses that were just exactly the same. There were 17 houses in a row on a street. There were blocks with 34 houses on the block, and every one of them was identical. Now, admittedly, they've been modified, and probably very early on, probably in the late 30s, because as people began to be able to lease them, the first thing they did was enclose the sleeping porches. That happened to virtually every one of them,
Yep.
with the one exception, which is 640 Avenue C. But the siding on those buildings and the little characteristics on those buildings, now, those specific buildings on the avenues are different in many ways from the traditional folk buildings that you see elsewhere within the district. And I really think that because they are a defined area, they're the avenues from B over to the alleyway between F and G, bounded on the north by New Mexico and Wyoming, and on the south by New Mexico. I really think that deserves a special place in the history of Boulder City. And one of the things that really irritates me that I'll throw out here, remember there was a walking tour, there is a walking tour of historic Boulder City. They very carefully avoid going down on the avenues. And that just really irks me, because there is a group of people in this town, and they're still here and they're still fighting, that think historic Boulder City is cherry and birch and ash and maybe the administration building and probably the hotel. And somehow we've got to convince people that Boulder City had a lot more character than that. And I think it would help if we can define, for instance, the houses where the people that actually built the dam, by the way, lived. Because the people that built the dam didn't live up on Cherry and Birch. They had a tremendous influence. Of course, they were the engineers and the foremen and the lead men and the draftsmen and the whatever, and the accountants and the bean counters. But they weren't the people that built the dam. And our signs all over say, Boulder City, we built the dam. Well, we did. So we ought to go down and look at the houses they lived in and see what's happened to them. Because if what's happened to those houses down there is what's going to happen to the rest of this town if we don't get our act together and get an ordinance passed. So anyway, Courtney, but let me conclude with, I really do appreciate what you've done, and I really think it's an excellent way to go. I don't have a problem with the concept. I really sort of struggled with that a little bit, but I think you're on the right track, and I think categorizing by style is fine. So I think that's my soapbox. So anyway, that's what I'm hoping can happen with the avenues anyway.
Okay,
So consider it, please.
Absolutely.
Hey, Courtney.
Hello.
They're a tough act to follow, them too. So I really like the way this is going. It looks great. And one thing that I did want to point out was, or ask, would, you know, the images that are being used, some of them are really poor.
Yep.
So are you planning to change them out, or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
This
great.
was.
With similar,
Yeah.
yeah.
Some of them, like I had mentioned, I mentioned this to Michael, we did Google screenshots and things because we just wanted to get some of the images on there. We're having some trouble with the aerials, the size of the aerials are not big enough, so when they tried to format them so they looked nice, like if you notice on the non-contributing where we have the street views, we couldn't get them formatted so they all fit nicely. Because of the resolution on the aerial. So we're working on that, and it should look nicer once we're done. We just wanted to make sure and get the information out to you in the basic, you know, how they would look.
Sure, and it's
So-
looking great. Another thing I had an idea for would be the use of some thumbnails, close-ups of certain features that are hard to make out, you know, like some things from far away. It's easy to know what you're pointing to, but, you know, like a close-up of the eaves or vents, etc., you know, smaller items that are kind of maybe get blurred out in the image.
Okay.
And that was my only concerns. I like the way we're going, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next round after all the suggestions that have been made. Sounds like we're on to a winner.
I agree. Thank you so much this is a daunting, huge project. And can you or Michael tell us what is, I guess, your next step? And is there a deadline for this, or just gets done when it gets done?
It gets done when it gets done. With the ordinance being considered by the city council, it will adopt the existing guidelines with the exception of the provision of it being voluntary. So we will continue to work on design guidelines with Northwind, taking your feedback for the contributing and non-contributing guidelines. And then the goal would be to come back next month with further revisions.
Are you just kind of picking at it and like, okay, here's the next version? Will there be an opportunity where, okay, this is our first draft, like this is it? Because I wasn't looking at all the details like Charlie was as far as, oh, this number isn't on there or that. I was just looking at kind of big picture, schematic. I guess it'd be great to know when is it that we really have to look at every single detail.
Well, certainly this level is the most detail provided so far. And so, I mean, ultimately, there will be a point where the committee is comfortable with the guidelines, and then there will be formal action taken by the committee to recommend these guidelines to the city council.
I just think that the next version that comes our way, and if it's going to require really a detailed look, it's going to take more than 5 days of when we get the packet and then come before. So I'm just...
So I guess we can discuss with Courtney when that can be available, when that can be provided to the committee. It may be that it won't be ready for the October meeting, and it would have to be for the November meeting. And we would just get it out to you early, or
okay.
maybe get it out as part of the October packet, but no discussion, and that gives you a month to review and be prepared to discuss in November.
That's the way it would work for me. I mean, do you guys need more than 5 days to review something as big as this, or?
Yeah, I think that'd be great, because yeah, it's a lot of hours to go through, and you need to at some point, it has to be done, so, yeah, I think a month would be nice.
Okay.
And you're gonna find all the little things.
All right.
Hopefully, we'll be able to clean those up. I'm gonna get someone on those addresses tomorrow.
Well, and, yeah, well, let Michael know it, because, you know, I mean, I can make mistakes too, and I probably make a lot more than you do, so.
No, I really appreciate the close eye, so thank you so much. I mean, we all look at these things, you know, so many times, and we're working off the Excel spreadsheet that we put together, which should match the property table. So if there's a discrepancy there and things need to be updated, we'll have to do that as well. But yes, we definitely appreciate all the comments and careful, close attention to it.
Are you able to communicate directly with a committee member? Would it be maybe helpful if Charlie and you were to work on some of this stuff, or? I'm just curious. I would recommend if it's allowed.
Well, I think what's helpful is kind of like what Chair Davenport did, is outlined and provided that to staff, and that's directly provided to Courtney. And certainly if she has any specific questions, she could reach out directly to the individual committee member who provided those comments to staff.
Actually, I would like that, because there's a specific thing that I would love to talk to Courtney about in that regard. That's regarding the siding on the 640. But, you know, because I've got some pictures I would like to share with her and so on. And I can do it through you, Michael, or I can do it directly to Courtney, either way, but, so.
I have a quick question about that. Is that something that is still available to purchase if somebody wanted to actually put that on their house?
I've been looking, I haven't, we've found it's called an exterior gypsum board. Actually, can you come, let me show you.
Well,
Come here. It's all right. It's all right. It'll be, yeah, it's, yeah. This is somebody had knocked a hole in the side of 640, and that, you can see that's a gypsum board with a stucco on it. But it's not a stucco in the same sense as the houses that you think of being stucco. So,
But to answer your question, can it be replaced? I think I just saw a National Register bulletin, new one, just this month, September, called Best Practices or something. And I think it's about using non-historic materials to replace historic materials, and whether that affects the integrity of the historic property or historic district. And I think there's an example in there on that board,
Oh, okay.
I think. Or I read it in something with Los Alamos, the 1940s buildings there. And maybe there was a project there to replace those gypsum board buildings with a non-historic but compatible material. But anyway. What direction do you need from us at this time, Michael?
I think we've been given sufficient direction, and so we will work on, the feedback received, and we'll provide the committee sufficient time to review the next round.
Thank you. Thanks again, Courtney.
Thank you.
Courtney. Yeah.
Okay, next item on the agenda is number 5, presentation by Community Development Director regarding 2002 NAPC Conference.
So at last month's meeting, the committee had requested that we provide an overview of the conference, and so I prepared a presentation for you and can answer any questions. So the city manager and myself attended the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, their conference that was in Cincinnati, Ohio between July 13th and July 17th of this year. So this conference is held every 2 years, and the theme for this year's conference was Bridging the Divide. We had the opportunity to attend the conference because we had submitted a grant to SHPO and received a reimbursable dollar amount of $4,000 to send 2 individuals to the conference. What I wanted to do, because between the city manager and myself, we attended many sessions over that time period, but I wanted to highlight in particular 3 of the sessions that I think can be potentially impactful for Boulder City. And so I'm going to go over each of those. They're on the screen there, and I'll go into greater detail. The first one was engaging the community in preservation. The members of that panel talked about best practices. One of the things that they recommended is that post-COVID, the best way to engage the public on preservation planning is to ensure that you take a hybrid approach, meaning engagement in person and online. Because as we know, people do not interact the same way that they did pre-COVID. And this is the best way to get feedback from the community. They highly recommended in the training the use of visual preference surveys. So if you're trying to get feedback on particular architectural styles, for example, showing those and getting the feedback from the public regarding that. And to tell the story as a way to best convey the benefits of historic preservation to the community. This session was very interesting. It talked about building a successful realtor education program. In many communities, the primary interaction between a potential home buyer and that community is their realtor. They may never even interact with the city. And so it's important that realtors within a community understand historic preservation, the benefits of historic preservation. And what this session discussed was how to create an educational program to educate those realtors in the community. One of the things that's key is working with the local realtors board to ensure that the training is accredited. That way, the realtors who have continuing education obligations will attend the training to receive those continuing education credits and learn about the benefits and information about historic preservation. They also recommended in this session a reference guide, a takeaway that realtors can not only reference themselves, but give to prospective buyers within a historic district so that they better understand how they can help preserve those properties. This has been a topic of discussion before the committee and was of great interest to the city manager and myself because we know this is a challenge in Boulder City. This session discussed on fix, don't replace, the shortages of preservation contractors. We have all heard from property owners looking to make improvements to their homes and or businesses and looking for qualified contractors to do that work. I can at least tell you that this is a nationwide problem. It's not just Boulder City. Many of the panelists talked about the challenges elsewhere within the country. And the challenge with regulations without the resources. So you have the regulations to preserve, but you have no one that can do the work to make the preservation happen. And so one of the solutions is to develop workshops where you would invite local contractors to come and learn how to work on historic properties. And one of the examples was window repair. I can tell you that one of the things Courtney and I have been working on over the last several months with the Residential Historic Preservation Grant is we have property owners that want to restore their windows but cannot find contractors to do the work. And I also consulted with Las Vegas, and they're in the same situation. They can't find contractors that are knowledgeable in this area. And so if we were to create a workshop that can train contractors to do this work, then we provide that solution to property owners. Another thing that was brought up during this training session, I have mentioned to the committee before that I have asked Nevada SHPO for a contractor registry, and they did not have one, but in Kansas they do. And so there's a model for us to look to in order to help develop a registry that will be a reference guide to property owners to say these contractors are knowledgeable on historic preservation efforts. So what are the takeaways from the conference? A lot of knowledge on best practices throughout the country with regard to historic preservation. The conference was very valuable in that regard. And then the local program opportunities that I had just discussed. And it generated a lot of ideas for how we can help promote historic preservation in Boulder City. And then the advantage to networking opportunities, being able to connect with professionals across the country and talk to them about our unique challenges, which aren't so unique when they're being addressed in other communities. So what are the next steps? I've already had a conversation with the Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Las Vegas, and what we're going to do is work on those two programs, the contractors workshops and a realtor education program. And what we want to do, and I've already had some preliminary conversations with SHPO, is use CLG grant funds to help pay for these programs that would benefit the entire valley. And so those would be the next steps, and then obviously, in order for them to be successful, promote them to the contractors and realtors so that we have good attendance at these events. And so with that, I'll answer any questions.
Yeah, Michael, thank you for going to that conference and stuff. You know, you're talking, you know, it's a good idea that a workshop like on window repair. You know, one thing is you have to find somebody that already knows how to do it to teach other people. And, you know, for, you know, this is, like you say, nationwide shortage of people and stuff. Maybe, I don't know how it would even start, but, you know, maybe there'd be some type of you know, an apprentice school or something to be established where you got some masters that can teach people that they can go out and spread it out. I mean, I don't know if you could start it at the high school level or something, or work with maybe the carpenters union or something, and get something started where there's you know, some place to train people on how to do this stuff. You get somebody, they get it out of high school, they go to work for a local contractor, building houses, being a framer, roofer, plumber, electrician, or whatever. that's all they're gonna know is the new stuff. They're gonna build to the new code and stuff like that. And there's no opportunity for them to even learn how to work on those old houses. And a contractor that's not versed in that, doesn't have people, they're gonna shy away from that. I mean, there's gotta be some place somehow, and I haven't got a clue, I can't, but where, there's establish some kind of training for the future of getting people how to fix this stuff, how to maintain these things. And if it's a nationwide thing, well, they can learn that trade, or, historic preservation guy, and he can travel the country over and find jobs, wherever they go. So it'd be a great field for a young person to get started in. Their services would be in demand, in any place in the country. I don't know where to start with that. If you're going to be in contact with Las Vegas, they're a lot bigger entity than we are. Maybe they've got some resources, some thoughts, or some ideas of maybe getting a program like started in high schools of how to fix old things. Just my 2 cents worth. Maybe I haven't got an answer. I've got a question, but I do not have an answer. I wish I did have an answer, but maybe food for thought. If you deal with the Las Vegas people, maybe they've got more resources. Maybe they can help get something going. I don't know if it's possible or not, but you need people to fix this old stuff. Well, they've got to be trained in how to do it. They've got to learn how to do it before they can do it. So.
Yeah, and that would be the intent, to bring somebody from, not from this region, because we haven't been able to identify anybody with the expertise in this region, bring them in, and they would train local contractors. But it's interesting you suggest, working with the local trades. That may be a great way to help promote this to local contractors as well, to ensure we get a good response.
No. You made me forget what I was gonna ask. Now, wait a minute.
Give it to Ray.
I had a thought.
One sentence
Yeah,
or
Ray,
two.
go ahead.
You're out.
It'll come back.
Thanks very much, Michael. I'm really delighted to hear that it was you and the city manager that went there, and who better people to get these great ideas, and so I really appreciate that. And the idea for having the workshops is really a great thing, so that's just really great. Speaking of the union, I was going to say it might be good to reach out to the union, and who knows, they might even have a setup where they have trainees or apprentices where they could have a mock-up or bring something like that in, or invite the guest that you're talking about bringing in who would provide the training. Include them and contractors. I know I'll be first in line. So thanks very much.
Two little things, Michael. How come? It's probably not the right way to say this, but you contacted Vegas. What about Henderson? Does Henderson not have some kind of a historic preservation? Maybe they don't have one. I don't know. Is that?
They don't have a historic preservation officer.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's a good reason not to bother with. The other thing that, and I may be wrong about this, but I hear it, is one of the problems is that for somebody to come here and work, they have to have a Boulder City business license. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so if we do establish people, they need to get a business license to come and do windows or whatever, yeah. Okay, well, that's fine, but the ideas are great. And by the way, I would suggest to the rest of my compatriots here that I watch the NAPC. I shouldn't say watch, that's not the correct word, but we get, what's the little thing, what's it called? It's the NAP, yeah, what?
It's like a listserv or a.
Yeah, listserv. I get 3 or 4 or 5 a day And actually, I find it very interesting because it's, for you guys that are interested, sign on to the thing, and because a lot of the things that they bring up in these little, what do you call them, posts, I don't know what the, are common to us. I mean, a lot of these questions are common to historic preservation groups everywhere, so it really is a valuable little resource, and I know Susan, hooked me up, so I think she can hook everybody up.
So I had a couple questions, sorry. You bring up the business license, and I was curious, how does that work if, suppose somebody, because it is such a small pool of experts, and maybe they're not contractors, but maybe they're an apprentice or a laborer, I don't know what the categories of that trade is. It may take just a laborer to work on a window, but if they don't have a business license, what if their business that they work for has a business license? Or what if they're from Vegas or Henderson? Does Boulder City allow someone with a business license and they're the only one that can work on historic windows? Does the city accept that or not? And so I guess I was wondering, when looking at getting contractors and folks who are, the only ones who have that expertise in that craft, it seems like there should be a little bit of a, accommodation. Not to say, you don't want to hire like sketchy contractors or, you want to be safe, of course, but I was just wondering, why does it have to be a Boulder City business license as opposed to Henderson or Vegas or Nevada?
Well, just to clarify, you have businesses throughout the valley. They're headquartered in one particular community, but in order to do work in all the jurisdictions, they have to get a contractor's license from each. And so that is just the nature of contractor licensing throughout the valley. And so when they do work in Boulder City, they get their license for the year, and then they can do work for, however many projects in Boulder City during that year.
Michael, you used a term here that there's a difference between a business license and a contractor's license.
It's the same concept, but it's a contractor. A business license is for an individual who has a business within Boulder City. In order for them to operate in Boulder City, they have to have that license. A contractor, maybe they're located in Vegas, but they're doing work in Boulder City, so they have to get their contractor's license. It's still a form of a business license.
So if I'm a tile guy, then I've got to get a tile guy contractor's license in Boulder City, is that right?
Well, it's not a tile guy, it's just a contractor's license.
Just
It's
any
it's just allowing that contractor to do work in Boulder City,
So the
just like a local
contractor's
business.
license is any contractor to do anything.
It doesn't,
With the state, the Nevada
I mean, that's not the
Yeah.
way it worked for me when I had the business. Whatever.
but anyway.
Yeah, okay, but I'm with Blair. I think it's something we could look into. Anything to sort of accommodate move the process along, but yeah.
And my final question, sorry. What is the local realtors board? Is there one in Boulder City, or do you mean local to the area or to the state?
Southern Southern Nevada.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Michael, I'm go back to licensing and stuff. Is there maybe some way that, I know like if a contractor's in Las Vegas, he's got to get his permission, shall we say, to work in Boulder City. Shouldn't there be, is there some way we can accommodate that, especially for to work in a historic district or something like that, a special accommodation that, that, because that guy works in, he's a one-man shop in Las Vegas, and he just doesn't want to deal with having to get licensed all over, to work in different areas where some type of reciprocity that we'll just go ahead and honor him. If he's licensed, with the state of Nevada, he's licensed in Las Vegas. Shouldn't we just go ahead and find a way of maybe just honoring those licenses without making those people jump through another hoop? I mean, it seems, if they've got a license, a contract, a contractor's license with the state and in Las Vegas, they've already shown what they can do. Why do we have to make them jump through another hoop? We're a little small pond over here. I mean, why would anybody want to, I don't want to go over there. I got to go through more damn paperwork and pay more fees or whatever the process is. You just say, it's not worth it for the once or twice a year I'm going to Boulder City. Why don't we just, come up with some way just to, we honor and recognize, your abilities, you've proven them to the state and to a large city, largest city in Nevada, we'll just accept those credentials. I mean, there should be some way around that. I mean, it's just another hoop for somebody to jump through that, I'm not gonna do that. For the 2 or 3 times I've come into Boulder City, I'm not gonna mess with it. Let's make it easier for them, because maybe there is a guy out there that can do old windows, but he doesn't wanna mess around any more than he has to. He just wants to come out, do the job for the customer and be on his way. Just my thoughts.
You gotta show.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a presentation. I'll be happy to talk to you afterward. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions,
No.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for attending and presentation. So next item on the agenda is number 6 for possible action update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities.
all right, this comes before the committee each month, and we have updated the matrix that refers to the goals and the priorities of those goals, and I can answer any questions.
Anybody have any comments, changes, updates?
Just one comment, I see you've had contact with 43 property owners, that's pretty good. That's moving right along, yeah.
Yes, it's been very beneficial with the flyer that went out to all property owners within the historic district. And Courtney and I have been very busy having those follow-up conversations with property owners. But it's been very
that.
educational and beneficial.
All right, no other comments. Moving on to the next agenda item. Item number 7 for possible action, discussion on public outreach to promote historic preservation matters.
And so at the June meeting, the committee asked for this to come back in September. For discussion.
Anybody have any updates?
Well, with regard to the video focusing on city-owned buildings, I'm sorry to say I have not made any progress on that whatsoever. And I'm not sure if I've abandoned the project or if I still intend to do something with that. I can't really say right now. So maybe we could just assume that I'm abandoning that project. And if I come up with something, I'll let you guys know, okay?
Is it something that we should keep on the agenda as a placeholder, or just go ahead and keep it, take it off?
Don't have a placeholder for it. No.
Okay.
I'll
Does that
keep you
include,
posted.
should we have a placeholder for just discussing public
Certainly,
outreach?
of course, but
in
with
general?
regard to that video,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll have a placeholder for.
Does that sound okay?
So when would you like that to come back?
Our next meeting is in November, and then there's nothing in December, so,
Don't we have October?
or October. Is there one in November or December?
October, November, but not December.
That's right, okay. Maybe not the next one, but the November one,
November, okay.
yeah. Please. Okay. Agenda number 8. For possible action, discussion, and update on the status of properties in the historic district or other potentially eligible properties.
And so another one of the requests from the committee last month was to include in this monthly update any new information regarding the CCCHP grant. And there's been no new information from SHPO. Beyond that, we've been awarded the grant. They're still going through the process of making final awards to other applicants. We would anticipate over the next several months a agreement between SHPO and the city, memorializing that grant agreement going before the city council.
And I don't think you mentioned it's the grant for the water treatment plant, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Just for the record. Anybody have anything else to add? Okay.
Oh, there's no guideline,
Okay.
No guidelines.
All right, moving on to the next agenda, item number 9. Committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings.
I've got a question for Michael. Michael, when's the city council going to be voting on the historic preservation,
Ordinance, October 11th.
October 11th? Okay. Do we want to put on the agenda for our October meeting to discuss that? You know, what the city council decides to do, with the yay or nay, we can talk about our thoughts and opinions on it. So,
That's a great idea.
Another add-on to that, Michael, what in the event if the council does approve the new ordinance, will that immediately affect this committee? Is there some kind of disbanding that goes on, or a new commission appointed, or would that be, what's the procedure if it gets approved?
The proposed ordinance that's before the city council, and you can look at the meeting that just occurred last night, because there was the bill introduction, and it's all there, including the changes to Title III. And that includes taking the existing committee and moving them to the commission.
To clarify, though, that just means that they are going to discuss it. It isn't a yes or no, is it?
Could be.
Well, this agenda item is for items for next month. So if you have any particular questions, I'm happy to talk to you individually about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't want to run afield of the agenda item. So besides discussing the ordinance next month, are there any other agenda items?
We don't start talking about Historic Preservation Day that early, do we? Please, no. Okay.
maybe set the date, maybe set the date and kind of,
Well, maybe.
That's a good idea. At least look at the calendar and see if what's available.
Okay.
That'll work.
Can I add something to the agenda item 8, right? So we've decided to put that as a placeholder in November, was that right? Can I make a specific item in that agenda item?
If there's additional information you'd like to see, yes, this would be appropriate to discuss that.
Well, I have a thought and about one of the things that has come out of Mooney's work is that there's 65 buildings in Boulder City that are individually eligible for listing. And I thought it might be worthwhile for this committee to discuss the possibility of contacting all 65 property owners of those properties that are, to see if they're interested in having their property going through the process to have it individually listed. So, I mean, it would be an item to discussing with, you know, I'm thinking maybe just sending out a letter to 65 property owners and saying, you know, your building potentially qualifies for, and see if they're interested, and if they are, then maybe the committee or the city can help, you know, move that along, because we've talked about, you know, the filtration plant, we talk about Bullock Field, we talk about, but there's 65 buildings within the historic district that are eligible, according to Mooney.
We
So-
can add that as an agenda item
Yeah,
for next month
Yeah,
to
for in,
discuss.
well, in November, if we put it in that item 8.
Well, it would be appropriate as, oh, I see what you're saying, as part of promotion.
Yeah,
Got
as
it,
part of
got it.
promotion, yeah,
Yep.
part of promotion, yeah,
We
I'm
can,
sorry
we
about
can
that.
add that so that
I
it is
left
part
out
of
one little
November.
technical detail.
Yep.
So, and I'll try to put something together, maybe give you some of my idea about what we might do with that kind of thing. Oops.
Okay.
All right. Oh, now where are we? All right, we are now at the public comment period. Would you like to come forward and with your comment, please?
Street, I guess. In terms of, it was just a thought, in terms of what you were talking about as far as the expertise that's needed for these old crafts. Well, I have been involved in, mainly as a hobby, early RC model aircraft and also boats. And if you, as an example, if you look on the magazine stand at most supermarkets, believe it or not, a lot of sort of questionable magazines, but one that's there is Wooden Boat. You're familiar with that? Well, if you look in the ads in that magazine, there are wooden boat enthusiasts, and a lot of them have boats that were built in the 1920s, 1930s, Chris Craft, those kind of. Well, the ads, a number of them are these expert little businesses that mainly exist in Maine and New Hampshire and so on. Okay, another aspect I've been involved in a little bit is historic aircraft. Now, if you want a 1940s engine rebuilt, there are firms, again, they're fairly small, a lot of them in the Midwest, like Vintage V12, for instance. So I'll bet you that kind of skill set exists for windows, for just about everything. Maybe not desert siding, you know. So what you were talking about, some way, that skill, those people could, you have to figure it out.
do the work. And here, that's a product in each case that's transportable. You know, if I had a V12 engine out here, what I would do is send it back to that company. And you can't do that, obviously. And then you have all the city and licensing issues. But I'll bet that that skill set does exist in small companies, most likely in the east part of the U.S. So that's just my comment.
Thank you. Great advice.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Actually, I think that's a great idea because I'm sure I can think of a guy that lives around the corner from me.
Madam Chairman,
Oh,
sorry.
Never
We
mind.
can't have dialogue, that's
Oh,
just public
that's right.
comment.
public comment, never mind.
Well,
Thank you.
and I don't know if you've done just a really thorough web search, you know, with the subject matter that you're concerned with. You will turn up these little companies, probably.
So additional comments, if folks want to call in, the number is 702-589-9629.
Bob, don't go away. I want to ask you something.
Hearing no one else, we will close the final public comment period, and this meeting is adjourned.